Day 1, February 28, 2026. The missiles hit Tehran before sunrise. Explosions lit up the Iranian capital like a second dawn. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed within hours. The most powerful man in the Islamic Republic, dead, just like that. Donald Trump stood before the cameras and told the world this would be quick, clean, 4 days, maybe less. It has been 34 days. Over 6,900 people are dead. Gas prices have crossed $4 a gallon in America. The Strait of Hormuz, the artery through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows, is effectively shut down. 13 American soldiers have come home in coffins, and Trump is now asking for 2 more weeks, then maybe 3, then maybe more. This is not the war they sold you. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing before you continue. What you're about to hear is a timeline assembled from verified sources, official records, and documented facts. It will take less than 15 minutes. And by the end of it, you will understand why the most powerful military alliance in history is struggling to end a war it said would last 4 days. Let's go back to the beginning. Not February 28th. Before that, in January 2026, Iranian security forces killed thousands of protesters during a crackdown on the largest Iranian protests since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The world watched, and Trump threatened military action. Then came the buildup. The United States launched the largest military buildup in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The signal was clear. Something was coming. Most intelligence analysts expected strikes on nuclear facilities. What they got was something far bigger. The United States and Israel started the war with surprise airstrikes on sites and cities across Iran, assassinating Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and several other Iranian officials. This was not a surgical strike. This was decapitation. 46 years of the Islamic Republic's leadership structure, gone in one night. Trump called it historic. He called it necessary. He said it would be over soon. Here is what he said on day 1. 4 days, maybe less. The war would be won in 4 days. Nobody pushed back hard enough on that number. They should have. Iran responded immediately and with everything it had. Tehran responded to US and Israeli strikes by launching waves of missiles and drones at Israel and towards several military bases in the Middle East where US forces operate. Amid the renewed, near-total internet blackout in Iran, internet connectivity dropped to 4% of ordinary levels. The Iranian government handed out special SIM cards to loyalists so they could control the narrative online. Everyone else was cut off from the world. Meanwhile, on the streets of Tehran, something unexpected happened. As news of Khamenei's death broke, security forces were deployed to prevent an uprising, with footage showing them opening fire on celebrants in the streets and shooting at people chanting behind the windows of their homes. The Iranian people were celebrating, and their own government was shooting at them. That image, regime forces firing on celebrating civilians, was one of the most significant moments of the first week, and most Western audiences barely registered it. Trump's 4-day promise had already expired. Trump said the war may end soon because there is practically nothing left for the United States military to bomb. He said the war was going great. He said they were ahead of schedule. The missiles kept falling on Tel Aviv. Despite Trump's repeated threats, Iran managed to keep the Strait of Hormuz largely shut to commercial shipping, disrupting the flow of oil out of the region. 4 days had become 1 week. 1 week was becoming 2. And nobody in Washington could explain the original timeline with a straight face. At least 4,300 people had been killed in the first 10 days of the war. The victims included 390 civilians, accounting for 9.6% of total casualties. One of those civilian casualties was a school. A deadly attack on the Shajared Tayyeba school in Manab killed a large number of elementary school girls. State media initially reported 167 children killed in the Manab school attack. 167 children, in a primary school. The US and Israel said Iranian military forces were using the facility. Human rights investigators are still trying to establish the full facts. What is not disputed is that children died, dozens of them, in a school building, on day 3 of a war that was supposed to be over by day 4. The plan, as best anyone could read it, was regime collapse. Kill the supreme leader. Watch the regime fall. Go home victorious. It did not work that way. Although Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed on the first day of the strikes, the regime remained intact. Iran's Assembly of Experts chose Mojtaba Khamenei to succeed his father as Supreme Leader on March 8th. The son, the father's son. Trump had repeatedly asserted that the US must have a role in shaping Iran's government. He did not get that role. Trump had opposed the younger Khamenei's selection as leader. Asked on camera whether he could declare victory with Mojtaba in charge, Trump said, "I don't want to comment on that." The regime they tried to destroy replaced its supreme leader in 10 days, with a man who carries the same name, the same bloodline, the same ideology. This is where the timeline becomes deeply important, because the war's stated goals started changing, quietly, without announcement, without accountability. The White House on March 12 identified 4 objectives: destroy the Iranian regime's missile arsenal, eliminate its navy, ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon, and end the threat posed by its terrorist proxies. That list sounded clear, but read it again carefully. Ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. That was the core justification. The reason Americans were told this was necessary. The entire premise. In the first 4 weeks of the strikes, there had been little military focus on Iran's remaining nuclear infrastructure. Neither the United States nor Israel struck Pickaxe Mountain, a deeply buried site near Natanz that Iran claims is for centrifuge assembly, or targeted areas of Esfahan, where Iran is likely storing more than 200 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. 200 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, still there, still unaccounted for. After 4 weeks of the most intensive U.S. air campaign since Iraq, the nuclear goal, the entire justification for the war, remains unmet. After 2 weeks of war in Iran, hundreds of people had been killed, millions more displaced, and billions of dollars had been spent. The Iranian Red Crescent Society reported that over 6,668 civilian units were targeted by U.S.-Israeli strikes, including 5,535 residential units, 1,041 commercial units, 14 medical centers, and 65 schools. 65 schools, 14 medical centers. These numbers are not disputed. They came from the Iranian Red Crescent, and the response from Washington was silence. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen said they had fired a third barrage of ballistic missiles toward Israel, aiming at sensitive targets. The Houthis had stayed out of the war. Now they were in. A new front, a new threat. More missiles, more targets, more interceptors burned through. Every defense analyst watching understood what this meant. The war was expanding, not contracting. And Trump was still talking about finishing in days. At least 5,300 people had been killed during the first 18 days of the war. Among them, 511 civilians accounted for 9.6% of total casualties. Henga confirmed that at least 511 civilians had been killed, including 120 minors and 160 women. 120 children, dead, in 18 days. Meanwhile, American gas prices were climbing past $4 per gallon. Grocery prices were rising. The economic pain of a blocked Strait of Hormuz was reaching every American kitchen table. The roughly 20-minute speech was Trump's first formal address about the war since the U.S. and Israel began striking Iran more than a month ago. With rising gas prices sapping public support for the war, Trump sought to frame the conflict as a success thus far. He said they had won. He said regime change had occurred. He said Iran's military had been crippled. Then, within the same speech, he asked for 2 to 3 more weeks. Trump told reporters, "They will have no nuclear weapon, and that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons." But later at that same event, he hinted that another president may have to come back to the issue in the future. Read that again. In a single press appearance, Trump declared the nuclear goal achieved, and then admitted it might require another president to come back and do it again. The contradiction was breathtaking, and it passed with barely a headline. Iran was not only hitting Israel. Kuwait's Civil Aviation Authority said the Gulf state's international airport had come under an Iranian drone attack that led to a large fire at fuel tanks. In Bahrain, a fire broke out at a business facility. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said several drones were intercepted. A tanker was hit off Qatar's coast. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates reported Iranian attacks on energy sites after Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, an escalation that caused oil and gas prices to surge. The entire Gulf was under fire. U.S. allies were absorbing attacks that Washington had not fully anticipated. A survey showed oil had fallen below $100 per barrel only briefly before rebounding. South Korea's market surged 8.4%. Japan's Nikkei rose 5.2%. Every time Trump suggested the war was ending, global markets moved. Every time Iran fired another missile, they moved back. The world's economy was now hostage to whatever Trump said next. On the 29th day of the conflict, at least 6,900 people had been killed. Of these, 720 individuals were civilians, while 6,180 were members of Iranian military forces. Military and government facilities in at least 190 cities across 27 provinces of Iran were targeted by Israeli and U.S. airstrikes and missile attacks. 190 cities. 27 provinces. In a country of 88 million people. Henga notes that Iranian security institutions are implementing a policy of systematic concealment, withholding accurate casualty figures. What that means is this: 6,900 is likely a floor, not a ceiling. And on the American side, CENTCOM officially confirmed 13 U.S. service members killed in action and 303 wounded since the operation began on February 28th. 303 American soldiers wounded, 13 dead, families that will never be whole again, for a war that was supposed to last 4 days. Suspected Iranian-backed militants kidnapped an American journalist, identified as freelancer Shelley Kittleson, in Iraq, according to the State Department and the country's Interior Ministry. One suspected kidnapper was arrested, but the others escaped with Kittleson, an American journalist, taken hostage. In the middle of a war Trump says is nearly over. Trump said he is considering pulling out of NATO because those nations did not join the war in Iran. France had already refused to allow U.S. military aircraft carrying supplies to Israel to fly over French territory. Trump had also hit out at France for being very unhelpful. France and Italy pushed back against some U.S.-Israeli military operations, highlighting how divisions between NATO allies had been exposed by the war. The most successful military alliance in human history, fractured, over a war that was supposed to end in 4 days. Trump struck a hard line, demanding that Iran stop blocking the Strait of Hormuz, or the U.S. would bomb the Islamic Republic back to the Stone Ages. A day earlier, Trump said the U.S. would not have anything to do with ensuring the security of ships passing through Hormuz. Two contradictory positions, in 24 hours. On the most strategically critical waterway on Earth. Trump previously suggested that the U.S. Navy may accompany commercial ships through Hormuz. The Iranian military said it would welcome the move, suggesting it was prepared to attack U.S. troops in the waterway. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright wrote on X that the U.S. Navy had escorted an oil ship through Hormuz, then quickly deleted the post. The White House subsequently confirmed the claim was not true. They announced a lie, deleted it, and confirmed it was a lie. All in one news cycle, about the most sensitive geopolitical flashpoint on the planet. Trump said he expects the war to end within 2 to 3 weeks. We've set them back. It'll take 15 to 20 years for them to rebuild what we've done to them. They have no navy. They have no military. They have no air force. They have no telecommunications. Foreign policy expert Trita Parsi told Al Jazeera, "Remember, at first they said that this war would be over in 4 days. Then 3 weeks ago they said it would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks have passed, and now we hear that it's 2 to 3 weeks. The timeline just keeps on being extended because, at the end of the day, the United States is no longer in control of this war." Not in control. Those are the words of a foreign policy analyst at a respected institution. Not an opposition politician, not a foreign adversary, a scholar who studies this region for a living. Iran's demands for any negotiation include allowing Iran to collect fees from ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, guarantees that strikes against Iran will stop, lifting all sanctions, allowing Iran to retain its missile program, reparations from the United States, and closure of U.S. bases in the Persian Gulf. Those demands are larger than anything Iran asked for before the war started. That is what 34 days of American bombing has produced. Iran's negotiating position has gotten stronger, not weaker. Here is the full picture. The war that was supposed to last 4 days has lasted 34. The regime that was supposed to collapse replaced its supreme leader with the dead leader's own son. The nuclear stockpile that was the entire justification for the war remains intact in facilities too deep to destroy. 13 Americans are dead. Over 6,900 people total are dead. Gas is past $4. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed. NATO is fracturing. An American journalist is being held hostage. The Houthis have opened a new front, and the White House's timeline extends itself by weeks every time the previous deadline expires. Multiple polls have shown that a majority of Americans now disapprove of the war. Trump's approval rating has hit second-term lows. The conflict has caused divides among members of the president's own political base. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called Trump's actions in Iran one of the greatest policy blunders in the history of the country, citing a failure to articulate objectives, alienating allies, and ignoring the kitchen table problems Americans are facing.